Good evening, Amaqhawe TV viewers, supporters of Amaqhawe Ethu. Welcome to our program, Amaqhawe Ethu Foundation. My name is Yongamela Manene. We are here as Amaqhawe Ethu to recognize, celebrate, and to always remember those events and heroes that are unsung. This month, as we all know, is Youth Month. And Youth Month is about the youth of Umzansi. It's about what the previous youth did and what is currently happening with our youth. Do we still have youth that had the drive of the 1976 youth, of the 1980s youth? Is the youth of our current time honoring those fallen heroes that have brutally been killed to free ourselves? We speak of many youths that have sacrificed their lives, left the country to fight for our liberation. This program, Ethu, Amaqhawe Ethu, in this month wants to celebrate that. As I've said, my name is Yongamela Manene. Today I'm hosting Ubawo Nelvis Qakema, unyana womqoba apha eGqeberha, inkokheli ephuma izandla ebutsheni bayo, ebengumfundi loyiso, wanyuka wayofunda kwamanye amaziko emfundo ephakamileyo, wadlala indima ekukhokeleni umbutho we-Azanian People's Organization. He has grew in those levels of that particular organization, addressing issues related to our country, our province, and our city. I want you to welcome him in your homes. I want you to listen to what he's going to be sharing. And as he is going to be telling us, one thing I wish to mention, I'm not just hosting any other person. I'm holding a national president of Azanian People Organization, Ubawo Nelvis Qakema. He's honoring us for being here in his very busy schedule. Let us welcome him in your homes. Let us listen to what he's going to be sharing with us as we celebrate or commemorate June 16. It depends how you look at it. Again, mazaleni tiyosoka isiduko esineseni ndiyakwamkela phakathi kuMaqhawe Ethu ngezamaqhawe ethu ndiyakwamkela apha kuMaqhawe TV just qaba nje kancinci uba khumbuze into yokubana ungubani, so that this may never be forgotten, so that the pride of KwaZakhele, the pride of Kerkut, Nweba,
Yes.
can be here today, Upper Studio. Thank you very much.
Hey. Thank you very much, Bawo Manene, and good evening to the viewers of Amaqhawe TV. Well, as you have said, my name is Nelvis Qakema. I was born not very far, just the other side of Ado, a place called Kerkut. But the indigenous people call it by its river, Nweba. And that's where I was born. And but I grew up here in Gqeberha, KwaZakhele. And my schooling, I did it here, Mzomchalo Primary School, Matolana Higher Primary School, Loyiso High School, and then I went to Vista before I went to the University of the Western Cape. So that's me, and I was there. And then all the struggles that you're going to talk about from 1976, of course I was younger then, and then the 1980s boycotts, 1984 boycotts. And,
you were always with us and you were
Yes.
part and parcel. Can you share then what roles were you playing? What was happening as a youth leader, looking as a person who's born before technology and the
Yes,
current
yes,
state of affairs?
yes.
Just give us what was happening in those days.
Well, like I was saying, around 1976, I was fairly young. I wouldn't say I was a leader then, and quite a follower, and
Yes.
yeah, having my several stones to throw, because that was the time when I think we've had enough, and then hoping that we will unchain the history of June 16, because there is a need to do that, tell the history exactly as it happened. And then that's why there is also a need to rewrite the history of the people and the history of the struggle, history of the country. And that was during the time of the Black Consciousness movement. Remember, in 1960, the much older organizations were banned. That is the ANC and PAC. And then historians tells us that about close to a decade thereafter, then there was a political lull in the country. People were just too scared to talk about the struggle, to talk about anything that was related to the struggle, because the leaders, had left the country into exile, and most of them were imprisoned, and then quite a lot of others were killed. So they didn't want to talk about it until young people towards the 1960s. Young people like Steve Biko and his comrades then came up and then revived the struggle, reignited the fires of the struggle, and though that was now the era of the Black Consciousness movement, which was now saying, look, the problem in this country is land. The problem in this country, is the dignity and the humanity of black people, through which colonialism, racism, landlessness, oppression have in fact destroyed their culture, their dignity, and their humanity. So 1976 is born out of that political awareness that this country has got to be called Azania. We reject the name South Africa, because that was the name that was associated with apartheid, colonialism, landlessness, and all the things I was talking about. So I'm coming into the struggle during that time, the time of the Black Consciousness movement.
Very interesting time indeed. And as you say it, in your time, landlessness, dignity, as well as the value of being black was not taken seriously. So you come into that time, not as a leader. Can you take us now, how did you become all of a sudden identified? Is it because you were taller than others, or you had some other aspect? What made you to get into that space? But before that, what was this interest into the values? I mean, look, why the interest into the values? Most of the people, they want to be white. They want long hair. Kwakustreshwa if manisakhumbula kakuhle, ngamatye ezintloko, ku-makeup, aqatywa oonimemezi. Yes. Yintoni le okanye khawucacisele nje abantu ngozingca ngobumnyama?
Yes. Now I'll say, for instance, when I was born in Kergudu, when I grew up within my first 5 years in Amaqhawe, in Kergudu, and that's where you learned quite a few things, about your blackness, about your culture. You know, for instance, simple things like when we slept as young people, we slept together. You know, yeah, we slept together. And then when you eat as young people, you are given one dish, 5 or 6 of you, and then a one spoon. Yeah, and then you've got to share that. So the African cultural principle of sharing, you know, and then respecting one another, because if I can eat with this spoon and then it can go to that, you know, and the fact that when there is umcimbi, you know, a goat or an ox is slaughtered, and then we sit together, young people and old people, in the same crawl, and our mothers, and then we listen to the elders saying these things and talking about these things, and then we listen, we learn from them, and then when we eat together again, you know. So from there you go to the urban areas, and that's where you begin to see difficult times, because I could not see that at that time, and then except living in the farms and then being kicked out, and you see how white people talk to your parents and how scared are they towards white people, and then this old man comes here, and then you know, everyone is scared of him here at home, but when a young white boy walks in, and then immediately he cringes. Now you go into the urban areas, KwaZakele, you know, and then we stand in the corners, we play dice, because I grew up playing dice, and yeah, under an electric pole, and then there would be a candle late at night if we were still playing dice there, and then but there are times when even when we're not playing dice, we're just sitting there, and a Land Rover would pass by, and then in fact even the way that it drives is just lawlessness, you know, it's meaning to terrorize, and then having done nothing, absolutely nothing, we would then, all of us, jump and jump fences and run away and whatever, because our mere skin color, our mere blackness was itself, you know, a violation, you know, of the apartheid law. We were so dehumanized. Even if you have done nothing, you have done something wrong. So those are the difficulties, and that's why you found me in 1976, and we're throwing the stones. And then I remember those days, because there were those bars, those liquor bars, you know. And then what was different during that time of 1976, they were not banning schools. They were not banning schools. They were going and identifying every symbol of apartheid, all the buildings and everything that was a symbol of apartheid. And then they went and destroyed those, including the liquor bars. And then I remember my own cousin brother, Malane Kekema, you know, who, when they were trying to force themselves into this bar, and then he was shot at, you know, and on the arm, close to the heart. Yeah. So I'm saying that was the experience. That was saying, look, you've got to stand up. You know, remember, see how young we were?
Yes.
Already we were learning. The circumstances, the conditions were fashioning us, molding us to fight against the system.
Wow. It reminds me of a very interesting story. The shouting of black power. We never understood it, because the people that were hitting the bars, they will come out and shout, Mac Mawa, because they were nice and drunk. That's what we experienced during those days. Ibala lo lakho lalikwenza automatically ube netyala, uloyike elunye ibala lomntu. Ubuntu babungekho, into yayikhona bobutshaba. Kuba abantu babengaphethekanga kakuhle, bengathembananga, bengaphili kunye. Usibalisela loo nto ke uMntakaQekema apha. You have mentioned, Mongameli, many aspects around. You were just there to throw stones. You were just there to udlalela idice lakho, and you were just there to seeing your dad or your parents being undermined, ill-treated by their farm owners, or by a mere being white person. You just bulldoze your way into any situation. You mentioned umntakwenu udutyulwa kwakhe. You saw all those things. But in that process, when did it change to be a political activism? When did it change to be into a leadership role as young as you were? Because if I may take a calculator, you were very young, around about that time. Wayintwana.
Yes.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah.
Uyavuma kom?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Asitsho kodwa namhlanje. Kasibalisele nje ke ngoku the actual activism.
Yes, and you would remember even the songs of the time. You know, there was one particular song which summarizes what I was talking about, which went like Sono Sethu Bubumnyama.
Yes.
Our sin, you know, is our blackness, you know, the color of our skin. You know, Senzeni, what have we done? You know, and you had those type of songs that you had. But you also had not only complaining songs and waging songs, and all that, but you also had songs that were calling you to fight, you know, like the song like Namhla's Buyayo, Kophalalikas. Yeah, even the day, when the day comes, when we take revenge, you know, for all what is happening against us, you know, the blood will spill, you know, because ours has spilled already. And those things have now, they were building the political consciousness. That was the political awareness in my mind. And then you go, you know that you can't go into that toilet. That one is not for you. You've got to go to the other one, which is not, you know, kept well. You can't go to that beach. That is one is reserved for white people. You can only go to, even if you happen to go to the same shop, you see white people buying, you know, over your heads and over your shoulders, you know, when you've been there first, and then you just know where you belong. And all those were, you know, building the political awareness in your mind, you know. And that's when you now see me gravitating towards now the 80s, now the early 80s now, by the time of the boycott. Now I'm there now by the early boycott, because that's a time of causes. And then we're moving in, and then in fact we were told that during that boycott of 1980, we were not going back to school, and then we would only go back to school when we were liberated. That's what we were told, you know. And the influence of that was the 1980, you know, independence of Zimbabwe just next door.
Yes.
So that had an influence over us. And remember, just a few years before that, there was 1974, the independence of Mozambique.
Yes.
And then later you have the 1980 independence of Zimbabwe. And then we come in with our 1980 boycotts. And that's where now this thing is becoming tougher. And then it goes back, and then 4 years later, there's another boycott again in 1984. And then by that time, I had already been picked up by Azapo, and it is now in 1982 specifically, when Azapo now makes inroads in me. I was now recruited into Azapo. And remember, there was no Azapo, the Azanian People's Organization, in the Eastern Cape. You know, it was something that was happening in Gauteng. And you got recruited into that, and then we were then supposed to work towards the forming of Azapo, which indeed we worked hard. And then in 1983, we then formed the first branch of Azapo. On the 24th of February 1983, we formed Azapo with the first chairperson of the Port Elizabeth branch of Azapo being Ngobonguna. That's when from there on, and then the same year, and then we then formed Azasam, the Azanian Students Movement, which was a political or an institutional of SASO, or Steve Biko's SASO. Okay. Because when SASO was formed, and then you had Azaso, which was formed by by ASAP, because remember, all the political organizations, of the Black Consciousness Movement were banned in 1977 on the 19th of October. And they were banned because, remember, the system could not take it, what happened in 1976, because the influence of Steve Biko, the influence of the Black Consciousness Movement and all the organizations that were there, the Black People's Convention, SAS or SASM, you name them. Because remember, the difference during that time, the time of the Black Consciousness Movement, because remember, we've got to stress this thing. 1976 uprising happens as a result of, it is being led, it is being directed by the Black Consciousness Movement under the political direction of Steve Biko in particular as the overall political leader. And the high school student movement of the Black Consciousness Movement at that time was SASM, the South African Students Movement. Yeah, of which Tsietsi, Mashinini, Khotso Siahlulo, and them were leaders. But then immediately the organization that was formed, which was formed by SASM, it was now the SSRC, the Soweto Students Representative Council, and Tsietsi was then made the president of the SSRC. And then it is this SASM, that was now galvanizing us as young people, the South African Students Movement. So in other words, I'm stressing this so that people know that this thing of the June 16 uprising did not come from the air. It was something that was brewed up, because already by 1973, you had BAU, the Black Allied Workers Union, under the Black Consciousness Movement, which came up with the 1973 general strike in the country. So from the workers, from the the journalists, UBJ was there. Every sector of society was organized by the Black Consciousness Movement to ensure that all of us came together, which is why then already in 1976, on the 8th of June, 1976, that is very, very important, that event in Naledi High School. Naledi High School, that's where the special branch, the police, had come to arrest Comrade Obangwenya or Comrade Inos Nguchane, and the students, just erupted, and then they revolted, and in fact they chased the police away, and then they bent their beetle. If you can look at the pictures, you will see that. So I'm saying these are the kind of things that were happening at the time. Remember, many people make a mistake of saying June 16 uprising came about because we were rejecting Afrikaans, and that was the cause. No, that's completely wrong. The rejection of Afrikaans or the imposition of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction was not the cause of June 16 uprising. However, it was the trigger, something that just triggered it, but it was not the cause. Because remember, already in 1973, there was the conflict between the Arabs and Israel. And that conflict between Arab and Israel then affected the oil price, because that meant that there would not be enough oil as a result of that conflict into the system, the OPEC countries. And as a result of that, there was now throughout the world a depression, between 1973 and 1975, an economic depression, which also affected South Africa. And during that time already, South Africa was spending very little on the black child. It was spending 644 rand on the white child and 42 rand on the black child. Can you see the gap?
Wow.
And then as you were having that gap, then and there was now a gold standard, the gold price in 1975 went sharply down because of this depression, and that caused more problems in the country. And then as you were having that problem, the one most important thing was that in 1976, 1975, the apartheid regime came with the law that they were saying they were now, because of the economic depression, they then removed one tier, which is standard 6. They then removed standard 6. And you had 13 tiers, you then had 12. They reduced them to 12, which then meant if you passed from standard 5, you were now going straight into secondary. Whereas before, they were standard 5 and then you go still to standard 6. They then removed standard 6, with the result that in 1976 there was overcrowding, and then there was not enough classes. So all those type of things, they then brewed up to create what we called June 16 under the leadership of Tsietsi Mashinini.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And thank you very much once again for honoring us as Amaqhawe Ethu to come to this program and share your role. And now, as you mentioned, you left us in 1982, 24th of February. And now, can you take us from there?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, that becomes important because, like I was saying to you, when the organizations in 1960 were banned, ANC and PAC, and then others arrested, others killed, others leaving the country, and then there was a political lull that we talked about until the young people like Steve Biko come into, the playing field. And then the Black consciousness movement started, and as a result of that, all sectors, in society, there is an organization for which that is built, and all of them. And then that goes on until 1977, and when those organizations were banned, all of them. And one important thing that we need to stress, particularly as the people of Gqeberha, we don't stress this enough. And then it is part of the history of this country. Even in 2010, when here there was the FIFA World Cup in Gqeberha, people were taken to museum like Donken, Donken. That was the important sport. If you go there now up there, you will see that was the most important. That was the most important history that was told. Yet, if you just look down there, less than a kilometer down there, there is a place there, the Sanlam building, Sanlam building, where Steve Biko on the 6th of September was incarcerated, and where he was tortured and done all sorts of things, and from the 6th until the 11th of September, when he was then now driven to Pretoria. But before that, he was, if you turn your eyes this way, when you are at that roof, and it's a settlers thing, it's got nothing to do with and about us. You will see Woma, and that's where Steve Biko, before he was taken to Sanlam, he was incarcerated. And this is, I'm making this point to you. Here is a political influence behind the overall June 16, and that person is incarcerated here. And then we are not making much of that history here in Gqeberha, So therefore, it becomes important that Azapo, it becomes strong in this part of the country, And that's why now we rebuilt it as part of the Steve Biko legacy, the Black consciousness legacy. And in fact, that's also where you see that when this June 16 uprising is erupting in Soweto on the 16th of June, but I've given you the build-up.
Yes.
But the actual eruption, and then is the march from Maurice Isaacson School, where Tsietsi was a student, and then also where Umkhoputse Tiro was a teacher who taught history, the history subject, to Tsietsi. Now people don't understand that in fact this Tsietsi, who is this now, yet his teacher was Umkhoputse Tiro, who later dies. Now, when you have all that happening and everything happening, and then you have a Hector Peterson being shot at, you have Hastings Ndlovu being shot at, but this fire burns through the country. In fact, the fire catches Gqeberha on the 18th of August. 18th of August in June.
76.
Yes, 76. Because it started, we were still lying low by that time. Up until August, that's when you see the fire, catching the side. And that's also when now our young people running around and, doing all the kind of things I explained earlier. But then that thing, happens here. But the most important thing we've got to emphasize, is that you are not seeing during that struggle, June 16, black people terrorizing other black people. You don't see that, as you saw much later, where you now saw much later, where black people, will be forced to drink your fish oil, drink Omo water, being necklaced, and be only because there is a disagreement with the struggle. There are things that they are not doing that the freedom fighters would want the masses to do. And then as a result of that, your car is taken without your permission, and then they take you, they have a right, they drive it anywhere they want to and whatever. And then when there are bus boycotts, if our parents, happen to take the bus and then the bus is petrol bombed with our parents inside that bus, you don't see that in 1976. Because in 1976, you had the black consciousness being in charge. And then that's when you see that instead of people being terrorized, but they are conscientized, they're educated, they're mobilized to an extent that it becomes natural for the people to participate in 1976, to an extent that songs comes out of themselves in 1976. As a result of that, you would see even the defiance. That's when people had they did not comb their hair and allowing your hair to grow naturally, and we used to refer those as Ama-Azania. So your Azapo, my Azapo then, and starts consolidating that further around this part of the country, and that's when you now begin to see, Azapo moving in the cultural boycott. Okay. For instance, you see the cultural boycott in the 1980s. That's when Azapo was in the forefront of that struggle, continuing, with that awareness, saying, you may have banned our organization, but we are continuing. Because this Azapo, immediately after the banning of the organization, Azapo is behind the forming of Azaso, the Azanian Students Organization, in 1979. Azapo is behind, this has to be said, many people don't know. Azapo is behind, the formation of COSAS in the very same 1979. So then at that point in time, you have your Azaso, you have your COSAS. Remember, at that point in time, many people, the Zolam Tatsas who you are talking about, all these people you are talking about, those were black consciousness activists at that point in time, and then you see this cultural boycott, because at that time it was still Azapo and the black consciousness movement that was in your early 80s. And then the cultural boycott was saying this country must be isolated. They must not play sport with the other countries. They must not be assisted economically, and then they must just be isolated. And that's why you see South Africa suffering and the country struggling, because they are not recognized by United Nations, by the OAU, And by all the world bodies, South Africa is not recognized. South Africa is only playing a role or having something to do with Israel, which itself was having its own political problems in the world. And this cultural boycott, which was led by the Secretary for Publicity of AZAPO, Comrade George Walkup, witnesses a stage where when people like, when the OJs came to this country, AZAPO was behind, that is the 82, kicking them out, Millie Jackson kicking them out, champion Jack Dupree, all those people came up until later when you find people like Paul Simons coming in here, and they were chased because all of them were now breaking or violating the principle of sanctions and principle of the cultural boycott, and AZAPO is consolidating that type of movement up until, unfortunately, when the ANC reintroduces itself into the country through the United Democratic Front in 1983, in August 1983. That's when then you now begin to see the ANC having now a presence in the country through. And up until that time, 1983, the formation of the Black consciousness movement, was having, was the influence, the overall influence throughout the country. And then with you having this country for the first time, you then began to have political tensions in the Black community between the two organizations, because they were now beginning to fight for space. So these are the kind of things, and then unfortunately, unlike the ANC, unlike the UDF, in the Black consciousness movement, we were very clear that you cannot be part of the problem and part of the solution at the same time.
Ngiyazivela ke abukeli, ngiyazivela ke baphulaphule. Utsho ke unkokheli AZAPO isibalisela about all these activities in his youthfulness when he was young, the role that they were playing as to deliver many other organizations, because there was a lull in political activism. Black consciousness brought back a resistance. There was no actions, no structures formed, and people were so proud about themselves to an extent, bazenzela, bazimela. Today he's sharing with us, and he's been with us and explaining everything about this liberation heritage from an AZAPO perspective. We may have shared everything else written by somebody else, but now Amaqhawe Ethu, our own people, are telling their stories by themselves, not being influenced by anyone else, but from the horse's mouth. We have these stories told. Today we're hosting Ubawo Nelvis Qakema. He's been telling us about his youth as an activist, his youth as an AZAPO member, and he has grown to be the AZAPO president. Now, in parting shot, he's going to be sharing with us what to be done and advise how it should be done. Once again, thank you for honoring us, and thanks for sharing all the information. And you've mentioned everything that known and unknown. You've brought it up to our attention and to the viewers' attention. Kids of today, or those that don't know, they have an opportunity to go and research for themselves and tell which is which and how it has happened. Thank you for sharing with us. Can you, in the last few minutes, just make some contributions as to how do we go about advice as a then youth to the current youth, and as a leader in your own organization, come and tell us what, as a leader, do you see as a solution to all these challenges that we're facing? The youth of today have challenges of nyaope. The youth of today have challenges of unemployment. The youth of today have challenges of personal issues. There's no law that separates toilets now, but the youth of today, both sides are victims, and both sides of the club are victims of drugs. They are victims of all these social ills that we're experiencing. What are you saying as a youth then? What are you saying as the elder now? Thank you.
Well, it is a fact that 70% of young people are unemployed, you know, and that just tells you that they are the most hard hit by joblessness. So you understand the frustration, because most of them are out there in the streets. I mean, if you look in even with the graduates, young black graduates, I mean, quite a whole lot of them, you know, it's difficult. They are not getting jobs. You know, they're out there in the streets, and some of them have got to go and be petrol attendants, and you know, or in ShopRite, or you know, in other words, they find them underemployed when they've worked so hard, sacrificed. So that is a fact. It is also a fact, as you have said, that some of them you find them, you know, being so-called street kids. And then some of them you find them being now, you know, some parking guides and sitting in the streets and showing people where to park, and then hoping for, you know, some £2 or whatever. Some of them you find that they say, I can't, that's £2, £5 the whole day. Why don't I just go and do crime? That's the kind of things that you find somewhere. And nyaupe, but it also has to be stressed. It also has to be stressed that the problems we are now characterizing that are engulfing young people, the elders have a problem. I mean, they have a contribution there as well. Because remember, didn't somebody said the doors of learning shall be open? Yes. But the more they open, the more they close, because education is not available to these young people. That is why you found that there is a fees must fall. They have to go and fight and die and be shorted for that which, you know, you and I already fought for in 1976, and now we are in power, you and I, we don't provide it to them. So you see that frustration. But as that is happening, you must also understand, you must ask yourself, who is providing, you know, drugs to young people? It is old people. It is old society. You know, they may be drug peddlers. They may be abusing drugs, but who is the drug lord? The drug lord are the elderly people. And then who is not arresting the drug lords? And then again, that is the government, their government. So I'm saying also, let us not absolve the old society. But having said that, young people have got to understand that they are the leaders of tomorrow. They must always have that in mind, the leaders of tomorrow. They must also have in mind that they are the protection of their society, you know, because they've got blood running in this, they've got energy, adventurism, all of that. That's the reason, you know, you would find young people even taking up and going abroad to countries that they don't know what's happening. They're sleeping, you know, in the jungle, in the forest, you know, going through rivers where there are crocodiles. And why do they do that as young people? Because they want to protect their society, you know. They protect their society. So the young people of today, if they can understand that Steve Biko died at the age of 30 years. Steve Biko died at the age of 30 years. And why was that so? And he was there providing leadership at a young age, because Steve Biko and them started to reignite, to revive the struggle as teenagers, where were elderly people? Elderly people were either in prison, killed, or others, in exile. And then Steve Biko and his comrades were the one left. Did they say, we will wait for direction from elderly people? They didn't. They said, this is our time. And they said, we are the ones we are waiting for. And then they got involved. So young people today must never wait for somebody to do things for them. They need to stand up and do those things. Know that they are the leaders of tomorrow. They are the protectors of their society. But also, when it comes, to matters of changing society, the kind of things that I was talking about, they must understand that that is not going to be resolved. Their problems are not going to be resolved by creating more problems for society and for themselves. Taking drugs and then killing your mind and then dying slowly. But when you take a drug, you are just killing yourself slowly, dying slowly and slowly. That's a form of escapism. You are running away from your problems, and you run away from your problems, you are creating more problems. So the best way to go for young people, the school. Education, never run away from education. It doesn't matter. You look at yourselves. You look at yourselves, you and I. Yeah, we went to schools, we didn't have shoes. You go through rivers, you go to travel kilometers, you go there, you haven't eaten in the morning, there's nothing to eat at school. When you come back, there's nothing to eat either. You sleep with on an empty stomach. But what did you do? Did you run away? Did you complain? You carry on. Why? Because you know that education is the key to life. If you want to escape poverty, education is the key. If you want to run away from crime, education is the key. If you want to build your home, education is your key. If you want to build your community and your society and your nation, education is the key. Education is number one. Do not mind that it appears to be like a prison at the moment in time. Go and stay in that prison, because after your 27 years, like Mandela, you will be a president, and the first black president, staying in that prison of the school, of the university, until you become the person you have to be. And then, being the person you have to be, then you change your circumstances of your family, your community, and your nation.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much for all that you've shared with us. I wish to thank him for coming and honoring us as Amaqhawe Ethu, as always. Yongamela manene, on behalf of Amaqhawe Ethu, ndiyagoduka nam ngoku enkosi.